I would like to have played against Ken. I think it's now forever impossible, but I'm a big fan of his. I would have enjoyed that.
When I finished the Professors Tournament, they asked me that same question. Or is there anybody you'd like to play in the future, they might have said. And it was shortly after Matt Amodio had finished his run, which was something that, besides maybe James, we hadn't seen in years, something like that. And I said, like an idiot, well, you know, I'd like to play Matt Amodio. He's a great player, and I'd like to see how I could do. And then I had to play Matt Amodio, and it was not all that was cracked up to be. He was very good at Jeopardy.
You did honestly, pretty well yourself.
I got away with it.
I don't remember how it ended, though.
And I'd like to play Ike Barinholtz, because he looks like a lot of fun, and he's a good player.
Yeah. I would say probably all the players that, where I was sitting at home just thinking, like, how do they know any of this? So players like Roger Craig, Alex Jacob, Larissa Kelly, Julia Collins, people who bet really big. I would love to, you know, play against people like that. Yeah.
I'm strong on dance hits of the 1980s, and I think I could probably handle Major League Baseball up until about 1970. You know, as a kid, I would read all the old stories about the players from the 30s and 40s, and I'd probably retain a certain amount of that. But then when you get to modern days, I don't know nothing.
I would say specific comics from Calvin and Hobbes. I love Calvin and Hobbes, so it doesn't really come up very often.
That's not a category we've seen.
But there's so much material there, you know.
I think calculus, just compute the following integral.
I feel like I could give you a run.
I would love to. I would love to. I think an attitude more than a resource is the most important thing, because so many people run into me and they say, oh, this would be a great piece of trivia. And it's so niche and really narrow that Jeopardy appeals to a wider audience, and they would never ask it. So just a sense of when something is just on the periphery of enough people's knowledge that they'll get that aha moment when they ask it. And that way you can avoid just memorizing all these little crumbs of trivia that will never come up.
I think they're, again, as what's your name again? As Matt says, it's more a notion of connectedness that I look for, that there are facts that, kind of like King Louis IX of France was also a saint of the church. Those connections make for good trivia questions, I think, and if you can figure out how these things relate to those things, how these books by an author, and I don't want to stick my neck out, Giraffe Boy, but these, did you see what I did there?
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's the obscure connections that lead to good trivia. So I think rather than try to memorize a list of facts, just acquire knowledge in a broad range of fields and try to see how they fit together.
Yeah, I would echo the open-mindedness of it. Like, just be open to new experiences. You might write something off like, oh, I don't ever want to read anything about opera. I don't ever want to read anything about classical music or art or bands of the 1970s or Calvin and Hobbes. But I think, yeah, if you're just open to new stuff, you might find something that really interests you. Sorry, that's not a specific book.
No, it's not.
Do we have specific books or anything?
I think it's
Encyclopedia Britannica?
Broad. You have to be more broad than that.
Yeah, you do.
I kind of have one. It was one of the wordplay ones. I think it was like a before, during, and after. You had to smash these phrases together, and the answer was Sour Patch Kids in the hall monitor. And it was really satisfying to get that one right, because you had to smash it all together, but also it gives you kind of like this funny image at the end of,
I remember that clue and I couldn't get it.
Yeah, I got that one. So.
I think my favorite clue was during Joe Buck's hosting, when it was asking about a Lee Majors 80s show. So it was after $6 Million Man, and so I correctly said Fall Guy, which was in the recesses of my head somewhere, just buried, and I said, oh, this is so obscure. I can't believe I know this. Is this even right? I say it, and Joe Buck's face lit up because this was clearly something as a teenager, or whatever age he was, he loved it and was so surprised that somebody my age got it. And that joy in his face just came through, and it made my day.
That's great. I don't know, I guess I've always been happy with the times when I didn't know the answer right away and I was able to figure it out while that clock is ticking with neither of my opponents buzzing in. And one involved people whose names were herbs and spices or something like that. And they showed a picture of a drummer, and I didn't really recognize the guy, but they described him a little bit. He was the drummer for Cream. And during the time that the clock was ticking down, I was able to cook up the name Ginger Baker. And on the show, when the pause, I think, was edited out because it felt like it was 20 minutes in my mind, or at least 5 full seconds. But I was very proud of finally coming up with Ginger Baker.
I think it was said already, but finding out that you could be interested in the subject if you just learned a little bit more. So if you think you don't like a subject, it's too boring, it's because you don't know enough yet. So I found so much about the fashion world to be interesting. I look forward to one day actually exercising that in what I wear, but I still find it interesting. And so I think the difference between earlier me and today me is that I do not write off subjects as being uninteresting.
I would say, and this is maybe a cop-out, but is to keep asking this question and getting perspectives, not over-rotating on any answer that any one particular person gives you on this. Like, people will give all sorts of advice in very, very strong ways, like, don't do this, just do this. Kind of take all of that into account. Like, I read so many, the one really awesome thing about people after they come on the show is they can kind of freely talk about like what their entire experience was like leading up to it, and people will tell you exactly how they prepared and what things worked and what things didn't. And none of these things I think are like 100% correct, but you can kind of piece together the parts that you like the most and come up with something that you feel is like a cohesive approach to getting better at it.
I'm just going to repeat what Matt said because it was exactly what I was thinking.
Why don't you repeat what I said?
Well, I never repeat what you say. So I found, first of all, I gave myself permission to go down web search. I don't want to say any particular brand of a web search company, but web search rabbit holes. When I encountered a thing that was interesting, I allowed myself, even in the middle of a conversation while we were preparing, I told my wife, look, I'm going to just get out the phone and try to figure out who that was. And so when it came to a thing like opera, I'm not particularly an opera fan, but I found that once you start to see these opera composers and performers as real people who just happened to live a long time ago, but they did interesting things in interesting ways, and they worked with writers. They didn't necessarily write their own libretti, and those would have been constructed by people who themselves were great writers. So again, it's getting these connections of what real people were really doing. You know, the artists and the writers and the opera composers and so on of long ago were interesting people with real lives. I'm interested in learning about that. You know, if I go to a diner, it's over easy every time. Got to be over easy. Why not sunny side up? I don't know. I learned how to say over easy when I was like 10, and it seemed so adult at the time. So I want that with ham, I want that with eggs, but if I can get eggs Benedict, that changes the whole equation.
Do you even eat eggs?
I do. I like poached.
Poached is good.
And the toast, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, I say fried, the crispy bits on the...
Yeah. My answer's easy. I would be a dog. I love dogs. I care about them very deeply. And I know any dog in my household has the easiest life on earth, so that would be.
I would become whatever is the primary predator of the type of dog that mine is. Just for this though.
So it sounds like you're saying you hate dogs. It's what I'm thinking.
No. Oh God.
Yeah, they're gonna just cut that part of the conversation and go.
The correct answer is obviously bird. here's the thing about birds. Not all birds, not emus, kiwis, or ostriches, no. The kind that can fly around. How cool would that be? You could fly around and look at stuff, and you wouldn't have to think very hard.
Any bird?
You realize you can fly now too. In fact, you probably did to come to LA.
No, I just
That's not
rode
that
in an
great.
airplane. That's a little bit different. Yeah, maybe not any bird. Maybe a proud, bold, soaring, majestic bald eagle. Do you have a problem with that, Heath?
I have no problem with you being a bald eagle.
Oh, thank you. But with thumbs, so I could buzz in.
Nah.
Yeah, and I would do really well probably on the bird-related categories.
Jet birdie.
I like it. I like
That's
it.
it, guys.
That's good.